how does the Assetto Corsa Evo Early Access compare with iRacing and the original Big Daddy Assetto Corsa? To find out, I'm going to be breaking down the graphics, the physics, the force feedback and the AI between each of those simulators. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give a conclusion as to what I think the likely future of Assetto Corsa Evo will be and where I think it will likely stack up with the other titles. Don't forget, if you want the power of being able to unsubscribe, you have to be a subscriber first. So subscribe so you can enjoy that unsubscribe. Some people do also click the like button, but I'm not quite sure why. First of all, the graphics and visuals. I think it's pretty clear that Evo does look really nice and certainly has some really nice graphical effects. However, you will find that you need a supercomputer to get decent performance from it. Now, with Evo being a newer game engine, you can take advantage of DLSS 4. You'll presumably be able to do frame gen, not that you'd want to use that with a racing simulator. But you also find that it's really sensitive to resolution. So if you're struggling with frame rate and performance, knocking down your resolution and leaning more on DLSS modes can really help you get better performance. Whereas with other simulators, you're better off just turning things like shadows down and other graphic settings. They're not as resolution sensitive. I would say, if you're talking from a pure performance to quality perspective, the original Assetto Corsa actually does better with its graphics. If you're playing in VR especially, AC is going to look better than Assetto Corsa Evo. iRacing as well, when you're playing in VR, despite iRacing pretty clearly looking a bit dated with a lot of its graphics, when you're in VR, you're more concerned about raw frame rate performance than high quality shadows and advanced shaders and reflections and all the other sorts of effects that you get in the new graphics engines. But I think it's pretty fair to say that Evo, if you have a supercomputer, is generally the better looking game. AC also looks absolutely fantastic, but does require a bit of modding to get it there. You need to get Pure and Sol and what have you. And then iRacing, I think, definitely looks the most dated. In this video, I am running it on lower graphics settings though, but that's for me to actually get really good performance in iRacing on all the tracks with all the content that we run and with some of the bigger grids. Worthwhile saying, when you have more cars in Evo, things do slow down even more, and iRacing, generally speaking, you can have really huge grids with it not being too terrible, and that's the same with Assetto Corsa 1. You can have massive numbers of cars in multiplayer and can get away with quite good performance still, whereas we're yet to see that with Evo. So that's the main graphics breakdown. On to the exciting aspect of handling, and I have to say, Evo in some ways does have some really interesting handling with this MX-5. Specifically, there's a nice little bit of slide and movement at the limit that I don't think you get in AC to the same degree, and you 100% do not get in iRacing. In AC though, you can really still drive the cars around aggressively, balance them at the limit, really play with them, and the tyres are still incredibly natural driving in the original Assetto Corsa. iRacing, you really have this defined trajectory through corners approach that I think makes iRacing, even with the MX-5, really bland to drive, especially once you start getting into doing faster lap times and closer to pace. You're basically locked into a specific bobsled locked path through the corner, and you have to approach iRacing in this very passive way where you're driving on the brakes and not the steering wheel at all. If you try and drive on the steering wheel, you'll get punished with time, and it's just not that productive. I did notice in Evo that if you clip the rear tyre on a curb, so Dingle Dell at Brands Hatch for example, it's very easy for that to just turn the back of the car off and there's no way of catching it. I've also seen this occur at Suzuka with some vehicles on the right-hander after the S's. I'm not sure how much of that is setup or suspension but it seems to be something that's happening quite a bit, so you just have to be very careful with those types of corners. And of course, in the original Assetto Corsa, there's certain radiuses of corner and certain curbing situations which also throw the car out in a way that you can't recover, so you just have to avoid the curbing. iRacing doesn't really have those types of issues with the curbing, but a lot of the tracks in iRacing have flat curbing that's not actually 3D modelled, so it kind of hides those situations if they were to occur. Newer tracks do have 3D curbs, but it's hard to do a direct comparison with that specific type of behaviour. I would say as well, in Evo, when you really overdrive the car, there's situations where the back comes out and the car is seemingly going absolutely mental without the sort of stability and poise that you'd probably expect from an MX-5. AC1, the car and the handling is a lot more consistent, especially on the throttle. And in some ways, I think a little bit more natural, though maybe a bit too easy, a bit too consistent. iRacing again, it's iRacing. You're just driving this trajectory. I think iRacing is like a form of bobsledding. Both Evo and AC1 are just on another level compared to iRacing. Now, it's worth saying there could be some weird ways to drive in Evo and some exploits that I'm not aware of yet because I haven't done enough driving or specifically tried really stupid driving to find exploits. But I have to say, with iRacing, it's pretty well defined. There's not that many mega exploits with the MX-5 that I'm aware of. And with AC1, there is some stuff where you can really hammer it into the braking zones, and there are some overly stable slides you can get into. But for the most part, I think iRacing and AC1 don't seem to have any big exploits, and I just can't say with Evo at this point in time. Now, when it comes to force feedback, there really is no competition. The original Assetto Corsa has absolutely extraordinary detail. You can feel exactly where the tyres are at. You have a good range of force for when you start to understeer and how much you're understeering. You can really feel what the back of the car's doing. You can feel it loading up. It truly is, the original Assetto Corsa, an absolute work of art, and currently by far the best simulator to fully take advantage of your force feedback wheel, especially if you have a direct drive wheel. Nothing compares. Like, it's actually insane. iRacing, you get reasonable force feedback. The MX-5's not the fastest of cars, so you don't have to be crazy in terms of response to everything. You get good self-aligning forces in iRacing. You can feel the back of the car coming out. Force feedback does tell you a fair bit with the vehicle in iRacing, especially the MX-5. You do have a range of forces in many of the conditions, but you don't really have that much information for the understeer. Car tends to get stuck in understeer anyway, so if you start really understeering with the driving, you've lost your lap time because of the tyre behaviour, so you've already gone past it for it to be useful. You get nice track texture in iRacing and suspension details through the force feedback, so it's quite immersive in that sense as well. Evo, though, on the other hand, the force feedback is very aggressive in the self-aligning on the entry phase into a corner when you're first braking and the back's getting a bit loose, and that will help you from losing the rear of the car on braking. That's great. You do get some vibrations. However, in Evo, as soon as you're sort of in the mid to corner exit phase, there is nothing. Once the suspension's loaded up, you have no real dynamic range or detail to the force feedback. Very similar to ACC's force feedback in that it's overly dampened, overly abrupt, and really lacking those subtle details that communicate to exactly where the tyres are. If I had to put it on a scale, despite the handling of iRacing being a lot worse, I would say from a functional perspective and detail perspective, I'd even put iRacing above Evo, even though I don't really like how iRacing feels. AC's at the absolute top, as I say. Evo force feedback is really just a mushy mess. and really, truly, hopefully something that they work on to improve, because it's probably one of the worst parts, aside from frame rate, with Evo. In terms of single player or AI racing, because we don't really have proper single player in any of these games yet. Hopefully Evo does eventually have decent single player. That'd be really nice. But in terms of the quality of the AI, easy winner here. iRacing's AI provide the most challenging racing. They provide the most realistic racing in terms of how they end up positioned through the field and the little gaggles that form and the type of racing that they do to each other, the accidents that occur and the moves that the AI does. iRacing AI absolutely wipes the floor with both Evo and the original Assetto Corsa. I would say between Evo and AC1, it's a bit hit and miss with either of them, but I would say that AC1 AI weirdly seems to actually work out better than Evo AI. The first laps with Evo, the AI is completely erratic, and even worse, will just plough into you for no reason at all. And sometimes they will just do Dukes of Hazzard stunt manoeuvres into each other. Quite weirdly with Evo, actually, is that it does seem to have some of the weird AI quirks in Evo that AC has, almost as if they've just taken much of the AI from AC and then applied it to Evo. I really, really hope that Evo drastically improves the AI, because as it is at the moment, it is shockingly bad. I mean, if you let them have a lap ahead and then you play catch up, okay, you can drive against them. And I guess if you're not a very fast sim racer and you're kind of just using AI as moving chicanes on the track, might not be the end of the world. But iRacing AI is just so much better to drive against. I'd even say this isn't a comparison with Automobilista 2, but Automobilista 2 AI and rFactor 2 and Race Room AI, again, just absolutely destroy it. So in this case, iRacing wins with the AI easily, followed by AC1, then Evo comes third, a miserable third. Absolutely shocking display from Evo with its AI. Come on, Kunos. In conclusion, Evo has a hell of a mountain to climb. That's not to say it doesn't have potential, and as I say, there are some aspects to it that I think are quite interesting. And I would say as well, Kunos have historically been a fantastic developer in terms of polishing and improving titles they've worked on. ACC, the original Assetto Corsa, and even going all the way back to Netcar, Kunos have always worked very hard on what they do, and it will certainly be fun to see how the updates improve stuff. That said, really, if you play other titles, you're really going to be better off with those titles. If you're a hardcore Assetto Corsa fan, or you were looking for the next Assetto Corsa, even, I dare say it's going to take more than a year for this to start actually competing with the previous Assetto Corsa. And then if you play iRacing and other titles, again, I think they'll be even harder to convert into AC. Now, I do think it will, of course, build its own audience, and you can see that with the cult-like behaviour that already exists. People will come to AC Evo and they will develop an affinity and a relationship with it, and I think that could potentially be a really big audience, especially if Kunos do actually deliver on the gameplay elements and then eventually release on console, where there's far less competition with realistic driving games. So I think this game ultimately will end up being a really successful and profitable and popular racing title, but at the moment, in the early days, I am very sceptical that it will live up to the glory and the power of the original Assetto Corsa, and I certainly don't think it's going to chip away at iRacing, at least for another year or two. But we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I want to see Evo rise like a phoenix from a pizza oven and slap me in the face and teach me a lesson in being such a pessimistic arse. So let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Thanks for watching this video. As always, make yourselves a cup of tea, drink it, make another one, drink it, and then make another one and drink it. Take care, happy tea drinking, and goodbye.